The conference room at Wellington Enterprises buzzed with tension. Marcus Wellington, the arrogant young CEO, adjusted his gold cufflinks as he glared at the janitor mopping quietly near the doorway. "Hey, you missed a spot," Marcus barked loud enough for every executive to hear. "Careful, or I'll dock your pay, assuming you even make enough to dock." Laughter rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "Why is he even in here during a board meeting?" Marcus smirked. "Clean the floor, old man. You'll never understand real business." The janitor, a tall black man named Daniel, didn't flinch. He met Marcus's eyes for a brief second, his expression calm, almost amused, before returning to his mop. The executives chuckled again, but one or two exchanged uneasy glances. They didn't know what Marcus didn't know, because this nobody, this janitor they mocked, wasn't just cleaning floors. He was the one signing Marcus Wellington's paycheck, and by the end of the day, everyone in this room would know it. Daniel Morgan's morning started long before the sun rose over the city skyline. At 5 a.m., while most of Wellington Enterprises' top executives were still asleep in their penthouses, he walked the empty marble corridors of the 37th floor, quietly polishing brass door handles and wiping down glass walls. He never complained, never asked for recognition. If someone dropped a coffee cup, Daniel was there within seconds, calm and efficient, smiling as though cleaning up after millionaires was a privilege. But the respect wasn't mutual. "Morning, Mr. Morgan," whispered Anna, the only receptionist who ever used his name. She gave him a kind smile as she hurried past. Behind her, two junior analysts snickered, deliberately stepping in a wet spot he'd just mopped. "Careful, don't slip," one said mockingly. "Wouldn't want to get fired from your dream job," the other added. Daniel only nodded, saying nothing. Marcus Wellington, on the other hand, arrived every morning at 10 sharp, stepping out his black Bentley as if stepping onto a stage. He wore Italian suits and carried himself like he owned not just a company, but the entire world. "Make sure my office windows sparkle," Marcus ordered one morning, tossing his keys onto the polished desk without looking at Daniel. "And for heaven's sake, don't touch my chair. I don't want it smelling like janitor sweat." A few executives chuckled nervously, eager to stay on his good side. Daniel's calm eyes betrayed no anger. If Marcus noticed, it only irritated him more. "You really take this mop thing seriously, don't you?" Marcus sneered once during a hallway encounter, holding up his Rolex as though comparing to Daniel's worn-out watch. "Do yourself a favor. Find another floor to scrub before I trip over that bucket and fire you myself." What none of them knew was that Daniel Morgan hadn't always been invisible. Years earlier, he had been a rising star in finance, graduating top of his class, building companies from scratch while his peers were still figuring out spreadsheets. But after selling one of the startups for hundreds of millions, Daniel disappeared from the public eye. While others chased fame, he chased something rarer: character. Working undercover as a janitor wasn't desperation. It was a test. He wanted to know how people treated those they thought were beneath them. One night, alone in his modest apartment, Daniel opened an old wooden box. Inside were photos of his late father shaking hands with governors, a degree from Harvard Business School, and a faded newspaper clipping. "Young entrepreneur sells tech firm for $200 million. He smiled faintly. The man mopping floors by day was the same man who had once been on magazine covers. He hadn't lost his wealth or intelligence. He had simply chosen to hide it. But at Wellington Enterprises, the arrogance was thick in the air. Marcus's inner circle treated Daniel the way Marcus did, like he was nothing. A careless shove here, a rude joke there, as though mocking a janitor proved they belonged to the upper class. They didn't notice how Daniel watched, silently making mental notes about who laughed and who looked away uncomfortably. What they also didn't notice was that Daniel never used the company's punch clock. He didn't have to. There was no payroll record to check, because Daniel Morgan wasn't on it. He was the reason it existed. The quarterly shareholder meeting at Wellington Enterprises was supposed to be flawless. Cameras were set up in the boardroom, trays of champagne passed around, and Marcus Wellington III stood at the head of the table rehearsing his favorite speech about innovation and growth. Investors mingled while mid-level managers whispered nervously, making sure every detail pleased the young CEO's sharp eye. Daniel was there too, as always, silently polishing the glass doors. He moved unnoticed until Marcus noticed him. "Unbelievable," Marcus said loudly, loud enough for every guest to hear. "Even today, we can't get rid of the janitor during important meetings. Who lets this guy in?" A few chuckles rippled across the room, followed by the glow of phones being raised. Executives secretly recording what promised to be another infamous Marcus moment. "Come here, old man," Marcus called, waving Daniel forward like summoning a servant. Daniel calmly set his mop aside and walked over. "Tell me," Marcus said with mock seriousness, "do you even know what a shareholder is?" The room erupted in laughter. Someone muttered, "This is going to go viral." Daniel's voice was steady. "A shareholder," he said quietly, "is someone who owns a piece of this company." His tone wasn't defensive, just factual. Marcus smirked. "Cute. And how many pieces do you own, janitor?" The wet floor sign. More laughter, even a few senior managers, desperate to stay on Marcus's good side. Forced grins. "I'll make you a deal," Marcus continued, leaning against the conference table. "Since you're so smart, why don't you give my speech today? If you embarrass yourself, you leave this building and never come back. How's that for a test?" The executives glanced at each other. No one expected the janitor to say yes. But Daniel didn't answer. He only smiled faintly, then stepped back without a word. The lack of reaction made Marcus frown. "What? No begging for your job? No tears?" Marcus scoffed. "Fine. Go clean the executive bathroom. Make it sparkle for our investors. That's the only thing you're good at." Phones recorded every second, a few murmuring that this clip would trend online before noon. In a corner of the room, Anna, the kind receptionist, clenched her fists. "He doesn't deserve this," she whispered to Michael, a junior analyst who'd always treated Daniel respectfully. "Marcus goes too far." Michael nodded. "It's disgusting, and he never fights back." Why? If only they knew. Flashback. 10 years earlier, Daniel Morgan sat in a sleek Manhattan office, signing papers worth $200 million. He'd sold his second tech company before his 35th birthday. He could have lived anywhere in the world, but after losing his father, a self-made entrepreneur who believed character was more important than titles, Daniel disappeared from public view. His mission wasn't to make more money. It was to understand people. The way someone treats the lowest person in the room tells you everything. His father had told him. That's why Daniel became a silent investor in dozens of companies, including Wellington Enterprises. But Marcus's sudden promotion to CEO had concerned Daniel. Stories of arrogance, missing funds, and unethical deals had reached him through board whispers. So Daniel decided to see it up close, not as a shareholder behind glass, but as a janitor no one respected. Back in the present, Marcus strutted through the room shaking hands with investors, acting as though he'd scored a victory. "See, gentlemen," he bragged, "you have to keep people like that in their place. The lower they stay, the harder they work." His words made Anna visibly wince. Daniel quietly left the room to do as ordered, but Anna caught up to him in the hallway. "Why do you let him talk to you like that?" she asked softly. "You could report him to HR." Daniel gave a small smile. "Some lessons," he said, "can't be taught by policy. People have to show who they really are." Michael overheard. "You talk like you're running the place," he joked nervously. Daniel only shrugged, his calm eyes betraying nothing. That afternoon, while Marcus showed off a new partnership deal, Daniel sat alone in the janitor's closet, reading confidential emails on his tablet. Emails only a shareholder with top-level clearance could access. He'd noticed discrepancies in the quarterly reports. Marcus was funneling company funds through shell corporations. The arrogant CEO who thought Daniel was beneath him didn't realize the janitor already held controlling interest and evidence of fraud. The shareholder meeting resumed after lunch, but the atmosphere had shifted. Investors filled the sleek conference room, their voices low as they prepared to discuss a multi-million-dollar merger with Eastbridge Capital. Marcus strutted to the podium, perfectly rehearsed lines in hand. "Gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice dripping confidence, "Wellington Enterprises is stronger than ever. This merger is just the beginning of our global expansion. In the second row, a gray-haired investor named Charles Beaumont raised an eyebrow. That's interesting, he interrupted, because Eastbridge has not agreed to your terms. In fact, I'm told they're ready to walk. Marcus's practiced smile faltered. That's not correct, he said quickly. I spoke to their chairman yesterday. The deal is locked. No, Beaumont said, standing now, his voice sharp. You spoke to a vice president. The chairman is in town today. He's not signing anything. Murmurs rippled through the room. Marcus flushed red, scrambling for his phone. From the back wall, unnoticed, Daniel calmly stepped forward. Excuse me, sir, he said in a steady voice that silenced half the room. If I may, Eastbridge will never agree to the acquisition price unless you acknowledge their outstanding patents in the agreement. The room froze. A janitor was giving merger advice. Beaumont turned slowly. And you are... Just a janitor, Marcus cut in, his laugh too loud. Ignore him. He probably read about this in the newspaper while polishing the floor. But Beaumont didn't laugh. How do you know about their patents? He asked Daniel directly. Daniel's answer was calm, precise. Because I helped file them 3 years ago when Eastbridge acquired Del Mar Systems, he said. Clause 14C prohibits undervaluing proprietary software in any equity transfer. If you push this deal without addressing that, Eastbridge will walk out and take their tech with them. The silence was heavy. 2 junior analysts exchanged stunned glances. How did the janitor know Del Mar's acquisition terms? Marcus sputtered. This is absurd. Security. Actually, Beaumont interrupted, eyes still on Daniel. He's right. If this merger falls apart, it's because you ignored these details. Daniel nodded respectfully. I'd recommend adding a royalty-sharing clause. That's what Eastbridge wanted all along. You'll close the deal in an hour if you do. Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't like losing control of the room, especially to a man with a mop. Enough, he snapped. Go scrub something, old man. But as Daniel quietly left, whispers chased him down the hallway. Michael, the junior analyst, caught up to him by the service elevator. How do you even know this stuff? He asked, wide-eyed. You talk like you've been running mergers your whole life. Daniel smiled faintly. Let's just say I read a lot. Minutes later, Marcus received a phone call. Marcus, what's going on in that meeting? It was the voice of Gregory Hale, chairman of Eastbridge himself. Your janitor to save this deal. Beaumont says we're signing today. Thanks to him. What? Marcus nearly dropped the phone. He's just some nobody. Not for what I hear. Hale replied coolly. He mentioned details only my board knows. Who is this man? Marcus entered the call, his face pale. He stormed into hall just as a courier arrived, handing Daniel an envelope with embossed lettering. Marcus caught a glimpse of the seal. Wellington Enterprises board of directors. Daniel slipped it into his jacket without breaking stride. Back in the conference room, Beaumont signed a merger agreement with a satisfied nod. Smart move adding that royalty clause, he told Marcus. Whoever advised you knows their business. Marcus forced a grin. Of course, he lied, but in his gut, an unfamiliar fear twisted. Who exactly was this janitor? And why did investors seem to know him by name? The next morning, Marcus called an emergency press conference to brag about the Eastbridge merger. Reporters packed the glass-walled atrium of Wellington Enterprises. Cameras clicked as Marcus straightened his silk tie and prepared to take full credit for a deal he hadn't even understood. Daniel stood in the back, mop in hand, quietly listening as Marcus began his speech. This merger proves Wellington Enterprises' leadership, Marcus declared. We don't take advice from janitors. We make billion-dollar decisions at the top. A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. Several employees glanced nervously at Daniel, who didn't react at all. But just as Marcus held up the signed contract to the cameras, Charles Beaumont stepped forward with an amused smile. Actually, Marcus, Beaumont said, I'd like to thank the man who really closed this deal. He pointed directly at Daniel. The room erupted in whispers. Marcus tried to laugh it off. You must be joking. He's just a janitor. Beaumont didn't laugh. Janitor or not, he understood the terms better than you. In fact, he said loudly enough for every microphone to catch. I was surprised to learn who he really is. Marcus froze. What do you mean? At that moment, Anna, the receptionist, entered with the courier who'd arrived yesterday. In his hands was a thick folder marked confidential. Ownership disclosure. Beaumont opened it for the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Daniel Morgan, majority shareholder of Wellington Enterprises. The room went dead silent, then burst into stunned chatter. Marcus's face drained of color. That's impossible. He cleans floors. Daniel calmly stepped forward, setting his mop aside. No, Marcus, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the atrium. I own the floors, and the walls, and the paycheck you're cashing. The press gasped, phones lit up, and reporters shouted questions. Marcus stumbled backward. You've been pretending? Why? Daniel's calm gaze didn't waver. I wanted to see how my employees treat people they believe have no power. You failed the test, Marcus. Miserably. Beaumont clapped Daniel on the shoulder. The board has already voted. As majority owner, Mr. Morgan is assuming control effective immediately. Marcus Wellington III is hereby removed as CEO. The cameras captured everything. Marcus's open-mouthed shock, the investors' approving nods, and the janitor who just revealed himself as the boss. Daniel looked directly at Marcus. All this time you were worried about keeping me out of the boardroom, he said softly. You didn't realize I'm the boardroom. The atrium exploded with questions as Marcus's security badge was deactivated on the spot. Security escorted Marcus out of the building as cameras flashed and reporters shouted his name. The man who once barked orders at everyone in sight now kept his head down, his empire crumbling in full public view. Inside the boardroom, Daniel removed the work gloves he'd worn every day and placed them neatly on the table. Anna, he said, looking toward the receptionist who had always treated him kindly. Effective immediately, you're promoted to executive assistant to the owner. Michael, he added, nodding to the junior analyst who'd spoken up for him, you'll lead our new integrity audit division. We need people who see value in others. Both of them were stunned. Sir, I don't know what to say, Anna stammered. Say you'll keep being who you are. Daniel replied warmly. A reporter called out from the door. Mr. Morgan, why work as a janitor when you own the company? Daniel paused, looking at the assembled staff. Because the way you treat someone you think is beneath you, he said slowly, shows who you really are. Titles mean nothing if you have no respect for people. His words silenced the room. Respect, he added, is the best qualification, because you never know who's really in charge. The board applauded. Phones buzzed as the story went viral. Janitor turns out to be company owner. CEO fired on the spot. Daniel smiled faintly as he picked up his old mop one last time. This is going to my office, he joked softly. As the cameras rolled, Daniel gave one final statement. If this story taught you something about judging people by their appearance, remember, competence and character matter more than power and wealth. He turned to the investors and employees with calm authority. Now, let's build a company where everyone is treated with dignity. If stories of hidden power, justice, and respect inspire you, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next.